Next, the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Cohen, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's been an interesting exercise in fiction. Ever since Bush v. Gore, when the Supreme Court decided to kill the vote in Florida and elect the Republican candidate for president, the court has lost and continues to lose the respect that it once had as an independent body that determined cases by the law instead of by politics. Bush v. Gore was a low point that has continued on in a rather parallel course. And we see now with the Federalist Society having control over who gets on the bench, what we are seeing in the diminution and the destruction of American values. Mr. Shapiro, do you believe in diversity among judges and among government leaders?
Depends how you define diversity.
I don't define it as white men. That's what President Trump has appointed predominantly. And at the Court of Appeals, he's appointed only whites. A few women, not many. Almost all white males, no blacks, no Hispanics. A record that's even worse than any president since Ronald Reagan. He's appointed about 200 judges, and only 8 of them have been African American, only 8 have been Hispanic. No African Americans to the Court of Appeals. That is despicable, because diversity is an important part of what America is about. Giving people opportunities, giving people, like Clarence Thomas got his opportunity. He hasn't risen to the level of Thurgood Marshall, but he's been on the bench and served Scalia well. George Bush understood appointing an African American. Donald Trump doesn't get it. The Federalist Society apparently doesn't get it either. And they apparently got some problem with Episcopalians and Presbyterians and Unitarians and maybe even Jews. It seems to be predominantly Catholics that they get and they recommend. Catholics are great people. And my brothers went to Catholic schools and I came close to doing it. But they shouldn't have a monopoly on the bench. And to the exclusion of Episcopal, other Protestant religions, and Jewish people. Merrick Garland happened to be Jewish. Ruth Bader Ginsburg happened to be Jewish. Her wish wasn't considered. Merrick Garland's nomination wasn't. And the fantasy that's been put on display here by you, Mr. Shapiro, that there's something okay when the president is of the same party of the Senate to allow a nominee to go through in the last couple of months because the president's of the same party is basically saying that there's no basis to believe that the judges are really ruling based on philosophy and the law, but that it's all about politics and we want to get in our team. Because Merrick Garland should have been given a vote. And nobody talked back then about, oh, well, the president was of a different party and that's why the rule exists. No, it was said by McConnell and all of his acolytes that the nomination was in an election year and we don't do that. And now all the hypocrites are turning around. The hair of the hypocrite is so apparent on the Republican Senate and on you, Mr. Shapiro. You mentioned about these judges becoming so controversial and being along party lines. I know you don't have much respect for the American Bar Association. I do. They look into each of the nominees and they rate them as qualified or not qualified. When President Obama nominated people, no person he nominated was considered not qualified. President Trump has nominated 9 people who were not qualified, 7 of whom were approved by the Republican Senate, even though they weren't qualified. And some of those people had allegiances and respect of Confederate histories and didn't respect Brown versus Board of Education and they're white people who don't respect the Brown versus Board of Education and want to repeal Roe v. Wade. What you have done with the Federalist Society is the end of the Supreme Court as we knew it, and you should be embarrassed. I yield back the balance of my time.